We don't serve cases like yours here. Last chance. Roll out or roll out with police. Harland, there's a small situation. Can you come down?
At this point, Brittany still thought she could walk out.
The receptionist looked at the wheelchair, looked at the worn jacket, and smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't bother to hide itself. Legal aid is 2 blocks down in that building. She pointed a finger toward the door. We don't serve cases like yours here. Nadia Ose did not answer right away. She looked down at the business card on the counter. The card she had just placed there, with both hands, the small courtesy her father had taught her long ago beside the shore of a lake in Accra, holding her hand and tracing every letter. The card lay there, untouched. I have a 9:45 appointment with Harland Voss. Her voice was level, not high, not low. The voice of someone who has said this sentence more times than they should ever have had to. Check the visitor list. Osei. O-S-E-I. Behind her, 3 young attorneys waiting for the elevator stopped pressing the button. The receptionist, badge reading Brittany in gold italics, looked at the business card the way a person looks at a takeout wrapper left on someone else's desk. 2 fingers lifted it, turned it over, set it face down. Harland Voss has no appointments this morning. Brittany tapped lightly at her keyboard. She turned the monitor toward Nadia. Empty. Nothing in the system? Then call him. I don't disturb senior partners for someone who isn't on the schedule. My name is on the schedule. The system says otherwise. The silence between those 2 sentences was wider than it looked. Nadia Ose placed her hand on her wheel. She didn't push, she just rested it there, feeling the cold metal rim through her thin gloves. The cold since February, 11 years now, ever since February wind off the Gulf came straight down Westheimer with nothing to slow it down. 11 years, she still hadn't gotten used to the cold of the wheel. Before the accident, she walked to the office every morning. 42 minutes. 42 minutes of moving and thinking, the way her brain had always processed the most tangled cases, the mergers everyone else had written off as dead, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. The people behind her were beginning to shift. Brittany Nadia placed a second sheet on the counter. Not the card this time. A confirmation letter on Voss Hartley Associates letterhead, Harland Voss's signature at the bottom. This was emailed to me yesterday at 4:17 p.m. You're welcome to read it. Brittany looked at the letter, didn't pick it up. Anyone can print a fake letter. One of the 3 young attorneys behind Nadia let out a soft exhale. Brittany heard it. She didn't turn around. You might be getting taken advantage of. The sweetness of someone explaining something to a child. There are people who pray explaining something to a child. Vulnerable. I'm only trying to protect you. Protect. Nadia looked up at the ceiling. The Voss Hartley Associates logo was cut into a 12-square-foot slab of brushed steel. 3rd largest law firm in Houston, 73 attorneys, glass corridors overlooking the Galleria. And beneath that logo, right now, someone was telling her they were protecting her. 24 hours earlier, she had been in her Austin office, opening the 847-page case file Harland Voss's counsel had sent over. Read it cover to cover. Highlighted 37 passages. Made pencil notes in the margins. Then called Harland Voss at 11 o'clock at night. You have 6 weeks. She told him when he picked up. Less if the plaintiffs push the timeline. I can help, but I need to meet in person. Tomorrow morning. Voss was quiet for 4 seconds. You understand what position this case is in? I know exactly where it is. That's why I'm calling. He agreed. The confirmation letter went out at 4:17 a.m. And now she was here, that letter sitting face down on Brittany's counter. To understand why Nadia Ose was in this lobby today. With the wheelchair, the old jacket, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight, and the almost like arrogance to people who didn't know the difference. You had to go back 5 years. To OC Advisory Group was nothing but a name on a business registration form and a laptop on the kitchen table of a 2-bedroom apartment in Austin. That year, Nadia was 38. Before the accident, she had been head of the M&A advisory team at one of Dallas's largest financial firms. Top performer 3 years running, $340,000 a year. On track to make managing partner before 40. The accident happened on a Friday afternoon on Route 183. when the truck behind her couldn't stop in time. 8 hours of surgery, 6 months of physical therapy, and one March morning where the machines were the floor until midnight. When she wheeled herself through the doors of her old office for the first time, her manager, the man who had sent flowers to the hospital, who had called every week during her recovery, stood up and said, "Nadia, we're so glad to have you back, but your position has had to be adjusted." Adjusted meant a desk in the corner, smaller projects, no more client-facing work. Nobody said the real reason out loud. Nobody needed to. She looked at that desk, looked at where it sat in relation to her old one, and understood. She resigned the same day. No negotiation, no notice period. 2 years later, from that kitchen table, OC Advisory Group signed its first consulting contract, a small Austin law firm preparing to acquire a competitor. The deal closed. Next came a construction company in San Antonio, then a private hospital group in Dallas, then bigger names, more complex cases, the ones people called her about not because she was cheap, but because she read to the last page when everyone else had stopped at page 200. 5 years after that business registration form, OC Advisory Group had 7 employees, offices in both Austin and Houston, and a client list Nadia never posted on the website. Not from modesty, because she understood that real reputation doesn't need a website. Voss Hartley found her through Marcus Webb, who had worked with her on a case the previous year, had marked Voss at 6 call Thursday at once and said in sentence, "Call Nadia Ose before you call anyone else." By 11 that night, she had finished all 847 pages. All 847 pages. That was why she was here. Not to prove anything. To work. Where the machines rattled the floor and front desk, next to a woman who was explaining to her how the world operates. A woman who didn't know that Nadia had been part of that world long before anyone here knew her name. Brittany. Nadia said it a second time. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Get your manager. But something shifted in how she was standing, the way both shoulders had risen slightly, the posture of someone straightening up because something had started to feel uncertain. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight, she had different from the calm of someone with nothing to say. It looked like certainty, because it was certainty. You don't understand how a law firm works. I understand it quite well. The first edge in Nadia's voice, not much, just enough to make Brittany stop. Call Harlan Voss or get your manager. One of the two. I'll wait. Brittany took out her phone, not the desk phone, her personal cell. She turned away, but the lobby had gone quiet in a way it hadn't been before. The 3 young attorneys had stopped pretending to wait for the elevator. Where the young woman at the coffee floor in the corner, Priya green apron, hair pulled back, neat, had stopped wiping the counter and was watching. Priya Mehta had been at Voss Hartley for 2 years and 7 months. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Before that, she'd been studying accounting at the University of Houston, 17 credits short of her degree, stopped out because of tuition. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. The coffee job wasn't her passion. It was the anchor that kept 2 evenings a week working through the rest. She had watched Brittany sort people many times. She'd seen the quick assessments, the smiles distributed according to an unwritten code everyone understood. Good coat, wide smile. Worn shoes, flat eyes. Wheelchair, don't waste the time. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Priya had learned to say nothing, not because she didn't care, because every time she said something in front of Brittany, Brittany found a way to remember it. 17 credits left. She needed this job. But today something was different. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. She wasn't the wheelchair, she wasn't apologizing, wasn't softening herself, wasn't trying to seem less like a problem. She was just sitting there, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight, with its bright steel logo and 4-star hotel smell, waiting the way a person waits when time is not what they're short of. Priya poured a glass of water and walked out from behind the bar. Here, she set it next to the wheel. Must be cold out there. Brittany didn't look toward Priya, but she registered immediately that Priya was there. Priya. Brittany's voice didn't need volume to carry a warning. Back to your station. She just wanted. One of the 3 young attorneys spoke up. He was about 28, round wire-framed glasses, and stopped the moment the other 2 looked at him. Sorry, he said quietly. It wasn't clear to whom. Nadia looked at him. Looked at the other 2. All 3 found somewhere else to look. This was the part nobody talks about afterward. Not when Brittany said the cruelest thing. This moment, 3 people standing 6 steps away, close enough to speak, choosing not to. Not because they agreed, because they weren't sure who was right, and that uncertainty was enough reason to stay still. She had learned this a long time ago, learned it in the first year after the accident, when she understood that most people aren't cruel. Most of them just don't want to lose, don't want the complexity, don't want to be on the wrong side. If it turns out she really doesn't belong first, it turns out she really doesn't belong here after all. They wait to see if she belongs first. She was more tired of that than she was of Brittany, but Priya was still standing beside her, not saying anything more, just there. Nadia looked at her. Priya didn't look away. Thank you. Nadia took the glass. Brittany stepped out from behind the desk. First time she'd left her position. A full head taller than Priya in heels, hair wound into a professional coil. She placed herself between Priya and Nadia like a door. Priya. Third time. Back to your station, or I write it up right now. Priya didn't move. You're helping a trespasser. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. That you haven't read. That you haven't read either. The lobby went quiet enough that the espresso machine in the corner sounded like a clock. Brittany turned back to Nadia. She looked down, not because Nadia was physically lower, but because that was the angle she had maintained from the start, top to bottom, as though the distance were fixed. You can leave on your own, or I'll have someone walk you out. Her voice had gone smooth. I've been very patient. Nadia set the glass on the counter, slowly. Load. Without a word, she opened her bag, took out her phone, dialed. Brittany watched. Priya watched. The three attorneys behind them had stopped pretending entirely. One ring. Two. Harland. Nadia said it when he just the name. The way you address someone you've sat across from in negotiations more than once. I'm in the lobby on one. There's a small situation. Can you come down? She heard Voss say something. Brief. Then silence. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Nadia lowered the phone. Brittany was still standing there, the smile still in place on her face, but for the first time she had no next line prepared. That was when Nadia noticed something about Brittany she hadn't registered before. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. She was someone who had done this job for 3 years, and not one person, not a single one, had ever told her she was doing it wrong. No complaints had gone anywhere. No one had stayed long enough. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. And every time she pushed, our supervisor nodded and called it protecting the firm. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. She hadn't been taught to see people. That didn't excuse what had happened this morning, but it told Nadia that the problem was bigger than Brittany, and the solution would have to be bigger too. She didn't say that to Voss then. She would say it in an email tonight. The elevator on the right opened at the 3-minute mark. Harlan Voss, 61 years old, silver-haired. The Ost, man who had built this firm from 3 attorneys and a rented room on Westheimer, the man Texas Lawyer magazine called the architect of impossible mergers, crossed the lobby and looked at Nadia before the elevator doors had finished, closing behind him. Nadia, he took her hand in both of his. I'm sorry you were kept waiting. Then he turned to Brittany. Voss didn't raise his voice. That was what made it heavier than shouting. Anger can be argued with. Quiet disappointment cannot. How long have you been with us? Three years, sir. 3 years. He looked at the counter, at the letter, still face down, at the business card, still unread. Pick up that card and read it. Brittany lifted the card. OC Advisory Group. Nadia OC, founder and managing partner. Below that, Mergers and Corporate Restructuring Advisory. She read it. Read it again. Set it down. Voss continued, quieter now, but everyone heard. Ms. OC is here at my invitation, not as a client. As a consultant, this firm needs urgently, and urgently is the accurate word. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. At the 3 young attorneys. Toward the coffee bar. Head up to the 12th floor conference room, Nadia. He turned to Priya, who was still standing there in her green apron. Her expression no longer tense the way it had been earlier. Would you bring some hot water up for us, please? It's cold out there. Priya nodded. She turned toward the bar, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Not the look of someone who won something, just the look of a person who has been holding their breath and has finally let it go. The second elevator opened. Nadia wheeled in. Voss followed. The doors closed. Behind them, the lobby of Voss Hartley Associates settled back into its morning rhythm. Heels on marble, phones, coffee. But not exactly as before. There was a small gap in the air where a question had been asked and no one had answered it out loud yet. What did we just do? Brittany sat down, the business card still in her hand. The 12th floor. Conference room facing the Galleria. The case map spread across an 8-foot table. Harlan Voss stood at the head of the table with two partners, Marcus Webb and Jennifer Sato. Both had been working this case for 6 weeks without finding a way out. When Nadia rolled in, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight, both looked at her with the expression she had learned to recognize. A fast assessment, not because of her race or her wheelchair, but because she was new and they didn't know yet whether she was the kind of person who solved problems or created them. Nadia recognized the look. She let it go. She read through the summary the assistant had printed. 3 minutes. She turned to page 6 and stopped. Here. She placed her finger on a paragraph. Voss and the two partners leaned in. The plaintiffs are arguing under California Civil Code 1542, but the case was filed in Texas. If no one challenges jurisdiction in the next 7 days, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Marcus Webb looked at her with the expression of someone who had just realized they were correct about something they didn't want to be correct about in front of other people. No, Nadia said. 4 months and the court may apply California law to the entire case. That's why the plaintiffs chose this framing. It wasn't accidental. Who reviewed the supplemental filing they submitted last year? The room was quiet for 3 seconds. Jennifer Sato set down her pen. I didn't see this. It's buried in Appendix C, page 312, the one sentence. The kind of thing people plant to establish precedent before the objection window closes. Nadia looked directly at Jennifer, nothing in her expression but the need to solve the problem. It wasn't your error to catch. But we now have 7 days. Voss sat down. We have a contract with Delacroix Group expiring at the end of the month. If this case runs long, Delacroix walks. I know. Nadia opened her laptop. That's why I'm here. She worked. They worked. The hot water Priya had sent up went cold on the table and nobody remembered to drink it. By 11:40, they had a first draft of the jurisdictional challenge. Jennifer wrote faster than Nadia had seen anyone write, her hand keeping pace with her thinking. Marcus pulled 3 precedents from the Texas Court of Appeals that could be used. By 2 o'clock, they had a strategy. By 4, Marcus Webb was on the phone with Delacroix requesting a 6-week extension with enough on the table for them to consider it. Delacroix agreed. Not because the law firm was persuasive, because the strategy was. Voss looked at Nadia across the table when everyone stood. No one in the room mentioned the lobby downstairs, not because they'd forgotten, because some things are understood without needing to be said. Which elevator would you like? He asked. It wasn't really a question. Any of them. Not like you to ride down with Mayan. Nadia closed her laptop. But I'd like you to ride down with me. First floor lobby. 4:47 p.m. Brittany was still there. Her shift hadn't ended. She looked up when the elevator opened. Voss came out first. Nadia followed. They moved across the lobby toward the front desk. She looked at Brittany. Brittany looked back, both hands resting on the keyboard, not typing. My business card, Nadia said. Brittany opened the desk drawer, placed the card on the counter. Nadia didn't pick it up. She left it there. You didn't need to know who I was to treat me decently. No anger, no triumph, just the plain fact. The simplest truths are sometimes the ones that land the hardest. But now you know. So now you know both things. Where the machines rattled the floor and toward the door. Outside Houston in the late afternoon, streetlights starting to come on, a trace of warmth from the sidewalk vents, traffic moving slowly down Westheimer. Nadia paused at the top of the access ramp before going down. Not because it was difficult. The ramp was fine. She just stopped to breathe. 11 years. She had been doing this for 11 years. Every new building, every new conference room, every new front desk, she always carried both things with her. The work and the preparation for a moment like this one, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. She was more tired of the preparation than she was of anything else. But today there was something different. There was Priya, who had brought the glass of water when no one else moved, who had stood beside her without knowing how it would end, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight and stood there because it was right, not because it was safe. There was the young attorney with the glasses named Daniel. She didn't know his name then, but she remembered the moment he spoke up and stopped, where the machines floored, and the way his shoulder dropped afterward, who would carry that moment longer than he thought, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. And there was Brittany. Someone placed inside a system no one had fixed and rewarded for following it faithfully. That didn't erase what had happened this morning. But it told Nadia the problem was bigger than Brittany, and the fix would have to be bigger too. She didn't say that to Voss then. She would write it tonight. The next morning, an email from Harland Voss arrived at 9. Brief, professional, appreciative. But the last line, "I will be reviewing our front-of-house staffing procedures. If you have thoughts, I'm listening," where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Then she opened her notebook and began writing the real suggestions. Not about Brittany, but about the front desk built 3 inches too high for someone in a wheelchair, where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. The access ramp with no cover overhead when it rained. The 3 years of shifts where no one had ever told Brittany that the business card wasn't the thing to read, that it was the way she looked at people when they walked in the door. The machines rattled the floor until midnight. About the absence of any training that protecting the firm and treating people like human beings. She wrote 4 pages, sent them at 10:22. Voss forwarded the email to HR with one line, "Implement." 1 week later, Priya Mehta received an email from Voss Hartley's Human Resources Department, not a write-up. An interview invitation for a newly created position, Guest Experience Coordinator. She didn't know who had suggested her name. She only knew the email came on Thursday, and the following Monday she signed the contract. Double her old salary, no apron, and the 17 credits still outstanding. The firm would cover tuition as part of the benefits package for the new role. Priya read that clause 3 times before signing. Brittany was not fired immediately. That surprised people afterward. She was reassigned to an internal administrative role, no client contact. The decision wasn't Voss's. It came from the HR committee after reviewing her file and finding 4 client complaints over 2 years that had gone nowhere because there was no clear evidence. Lobby cameras, 4 angles, full audio, had changed what counted as evidence. Brittany sat in a small conference room with HR, both hands laced together on the table. "I was following procedure," she said. "Procedure doesn't require turning a visitor's card face down. And nothing in our procedures requires you to use the phrase, 'cases like yours,' with anyone who walks through that door." Brittany had no answer for that. It was the first time that day she hadn't. Where the machines rattled the floor midnight. What she would only begin to understand weeks later was that "I was following procedure" wasn't factually wrong, but procedure wasn't something she could hide in indefinitely. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. Procedure hadn't taught her to look at people the way she looked at them. She had learned that somewhere else in years before she ever sat down behind that desk, and that wasn't the procedure's fault. The Voss Hartley case settled out of court 4 months later. No one disclosed the number. But Delacroix Group signed a new 5-year contract. Marcus Webb was elevated to managing partner. Jennifer Sato was put in charge of the firm's newly formed strategic advisory team, and the name OC Advisory Group began appearing on the preferred consultant lists of 3 of the largest law firms in Texas within 6 months. Not because anyone promoted it, because in that world, good news travels the way it does. Nadia issued no statement. She gave no interviews about that morning. Only one sentence, in a reply to a reporter who wanted to write a piece. "I don't do what I do to prove I belong somewhere. I belonged before I walked in." Priya taped that sentence to her monitor in her new office, not because it was true in the way she had always known it to be true, but no one had ever put into words. No one had ever put into words. Where the machines rattled the floor until midnight. And Daniel Cho, the young attorney with the round wire-framed glasses, 2nd year of his clerkship, wrote in his journal that night, "Today I stood close enough that there was no reason not to speak, and far enough that I could tell myself it wasn't my place. I chose silence. I won't do that again." He kept that promise. The next time came sooner than he expected. 3 weeks later, in a different conference room with a different person. That time he spoke before he had finished deciding whether to. It wasn't a grand act of courage. It was just a new habit, chosen on the day he stood still and understood he didn't want to feel that way again. The first floor lobby of Voss Hartley didn't change much on the surface. Same marble, same brushed steel logo, same coffee smell from the bar in the corner. But the front desk was 3 inches lower now, a design adjustment made during a small renovation in April. No official explanation was given. And on the access ramp from the street, there was a new cover overhead. Small, practical. The kind of thing no one notices unless they know why it's there. Nadia knew. On a Monday morning in May, she came back to Voss Hartley for another meeting. The ramp was dry. The cover had done its job overnight when Houston had rained until 3 in the morning. She wheeled herself in. At the front desk, a new face looked up. The smile started before she had time to reach for her card. "Good morning. Ms. Osei, right? Conference room 12 is ready. Let Mr. Voss know you're here." Nadia stopped. "You know my name. Priya put you on the VIP list." The new receptionist smiled. "She told me about you on my very first day." Nadia looked toward the coffee bar. Someone else was working the machine now, but taped next to the espresso maker, fixed with a strip of clear tape, was a small handwritten note. Nadia couldn't read it from here, but she had a machine rattled the floor until midnight. But she had a reasonable idea of what it said. Not everything needs to be spoken out loud. Sometimes a cover over a ramp is enough. Sometimes a name on a VIP list is enough. Sometimes a person putting down their cloth and bringing over a glass of water is enough, not because they know how it will end, but because it was the right thing in that exact second. The elevator opened. The 12th floor was waiting. On the conference table, another case, another file, 800 more pages that someone had given up on before reaching the last one. Nadia knew the last page. She always read to the last page.